wrong intention, etc. We said that the breads are not sanctified. And we said also that that same would apply to the Eila Miluim, to the inauguration offering that also had a sacrifice, an animal sacrifice that came along with breads. And the same thing would apply to the two sheep and the two breads of Shavuos, the Shtei Alechem. Amar of Papa, Shabak Tana Didan, El Nazir. There's a more common sacrifice. The Shchiach. A Nazir brings a sacrifice, he brings a ram, and he brings breads along with it. And when we're discussing if the breads become sanctified with the shechita of the sacrifice and all of that, our Mishnah left that out, and instead it shows El Miluim, Benakat El Miluim, which was in the tabernacle times in the desert. It was a one-time offering. So it's a little odd. Rav Papa's pointing out that our Mishnah should leave out something that's common, and it takes that. The Gemara explains, "V'tani dan ikimel senakat." The Tana was explaining the source of everything.
Is it talking about the? It says here in the English, 2 communal shlamim lambs of Shavuos.
Yeah.
Is it also talking about those?
Yeah, our Mishnah mentions the Shavuos one, but it doesn't mention the Nazir one, and it chooses instead of the Nazir, it puts in the El Miluim, and the El Miluim was only this one-time occurrence in the when the tabernacle was inaugurated. So the Gemara explains that yes, but that's very significant, because if not for that, we wouldn't have had the anything afterwards. So to talk about the original sacrifice is significant. Okay. Together with every sacrifice, with most sacrifices, most animal sacrifices was brought flour and oil and wine. So hanasachim shekitshu bekeli. If you put the flour and the oil into the vessel, the wine, I don't know if it was put into a separate, specific vessel or not. I think it was. You put it into the holy vessel. V'nimtza zevach pasel. Then you offer the sacrifice, and it turns out the sacrifice is invalid. So im yesh zevach acher, if there's another sacrifice available. So yakrivu imay, you can bring it together with that other sacrifice. V'im lav, if there's no other sacrifice available, then yifsulu balina, it's going to become invalid, because usually yifsulu balina means it's going to become invalid because it's left overnight. And it's only kosher on that day. We'll see that it doesn't really mean that. But okay. Omar Ze'iri. Ze'iri is a first generation Amayra. He's a contemporary of Rab and Shmuel. He says, Einan Nesachim Eskachim Ela B'Shchitas Zevach. It sounded from the Mishnah that when you put it in the vessel, it becomes sanctified. Ze'iri says that the Mishnah is not really precise. It's put into a vessel, but that's not all. You also need the shechita of the sacrifice to sanctify it. My timer, what's the reason? Amar Kra, he says, I have a pasuk. Zevach u'nesachim. The pasuk says that these are the holidays in Parshas Emor. Mikrei Kodesh, Lakavish Shel Hashem, Ola Mincha, Zevach u'nesachim. It says the sacrifice and what comes along with it. Tanan. It's taught in the Mishnah. Hanesachim, it's our Mishnah. Nesachim shekitshu bekeli, the nesachim that you put into a vessel, v'nim to zevach pasel, and you have and the offering itself becomes invalid. Im yesh zevach achei yakrivu imay. If there's another sacrifice, then you bring the meal offering with it. V'im lav yifselu belina, and if not, then you let it become invalid because it's left overnight. My lav. What was the case that the sacrifice became invalid? How did it become invalid? We were very vague about that. Is it not Yifsel b'shchita, that the shchita was no good? 1 second. According to Ze'iri, the shchita is what sanctifies it. If there was no sanctification, so why does it become invalid? It was never sanctified to become invalid. It's just regular flour. It's only when would it become invalid? Only if it was sanctified and we weren't able to offer it, it would become invalid. But here, according to Ze'iri, the shechita is what sanctifies it. So you just have regular flour here. The Gemara says, Loi. The shechita was done properly. However, the ifsal bezrika, it was the sprinkling of the blood that was no good. So that's why it's invalid.
What's no good in the sprinkling of blood?
They spilt the blood before they sprinkled it, or he had the wrong thoughts by the sprinkling, or
also,
whatever.
Okay.
Come on. who would this go like? Now we have a machlekes when you have two matirim. You have what allows the animal, what's matir the animal, is the shchita and the zrika. Those are the two main services. Both of them are done. The animal is the sacrifice is valid. Of machlekes, if one of them works, who would this fit like? We just said that the shchita would permit would sanctify the breads without the zrika.
That's Eily.
Well, the Eily is the one that says that. But now, who is this going to fit with? Which Tana would it fit with? Eily is an Amayr. It says it would fit with Kerebi. If you have two things that permit the sacrifice, Malin Zebelezer, one works without the other one. This was a discussion. If the shchita was done lishma and the zrika was done shaloi lishma, what happens to the bread? So Rabbi said, the halechem kaddish ve'ena kaddish. It's holy but not holy. That means something did take effect there. The other opinion says nothing. It's worthless.
So when you say mali zeh, that means it's sanctified?
Something takes place. There is an effect that happens.
Is it brought on the mizbeach?
No, well, the breads weren't brought anyway.
But the wine, for example.
No, 1 second. No, when we're dealing with nesachim, it is brought on the mizbeach. It's totally brought on the mizbeach.
So it's made. Even though the zevach doesn't come up, the nesachim go up.
Yeah.
Because one of the two was okay.
There was a machlekes Abai and Rabbi.
How could you have one of the two that's okay? How could you have zrika that's okay and shchita that's not okay?
No, the opposite. It's the shchita that's okay and the zrika that's not okay. But there's a machlekes Abai and Rabbi.
The statement is wrong.
The
what do you mean
sounds
matir
like
zeh?
right.
Zrika is not matir shchita. The term matir zeh means
should have been different.
One could be matir the other.
Right.
On its own.
This was a discussion that regarding the Shtei Alechem, and it was Mem Zayin. Yeah, so the Gemara over here says that according to Rabbi, it's Alechem Kaddish Ve'ena Kaddish. Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon says no. It's Eina Kaddish ad sheyishchad lishman v'yizrik dam lishman. You need both. So Rabbi argues with Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon. Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon holds that you need both. Now, what does Rabbi mean? Halechem Kaddish ve'ena Kaddish. That's a machlekes Abai and Rava.
What happens if the zrika was good, and later on, as they're bringing the korban to mizbech, they find that the shchita wasn't good? Is it matirin zayza?
I don't know if there's such a thing. No, I don't know if we're going to look at the shchita because it was already possible beforehand.
No.
We didn't know about it.
We
but
didn't
it's legloi muslim afreya that it was possible. So how do you have a zrika?
But matirin zayza, the term matirin zayza means one could matir the other without the other.
Right. It should have been said specifically if it only works one way.
Only one way.
It's only one way.
Okay.
I understand the question.
All right.
It's a question on the phrase, on the terms.
Okay.
So this must be according to Rabbi, not according to Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon, because according to Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon, the zrika was possible. So we're not going to say that the breads that the nesachim were sanctified. Gemara says no. In this case, it's different. Afilu temer Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon. We could even say Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon that says that you need both. You need the shchita and you need the zrika. Over here, you only need the shchita. Why? Here we're dealing with a case. You received the blood into the vessel, ready to do the sprinkling, but then it's spilled. Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon savala kavasei da'avua. Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon holds like his father, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, has a very famous statement. Damar kala imid li zarek zarek dami.
Wow.
Reb Shimon Bar Yochai holds. He looks at the potential. Right? He says that if you could have sprinkled it, then you don't need to actually. Then it's valid even without the sprinkling. It's as if it was sprinkled. So why was it over there a problem? He says over there you sprinkled it wrong. Over here you didn't sprinkle it.
Yeah,
it's even better. The fact it was never messed up. It was just never done. So it was, but it had potential to be done. So everything that's meant to take effect because of that potential takes effect. The potential is enough to.
Is there such a thing, acharei? Is such a thing as far that you had the potential to do something, so it's considered done? Nothing to do with pigul, nothing to do with.
What comes to mind is the 10 people in a minyan that the shchin is there because of the bittul, the 10 people that because they have potential to be ma'aser nefesh, right? That's not the lashon of the Alter Rebbe, because they have potential to be ma'aser nefesh. So
what does that do with having a minyan?
No, I'm saying that we're talking about the potential.
Even if you don't have kavanah.
Even if you don't have kavanah.
Oh.
But 10 people got out of bed, walked to shul.
Oh, you say that the cheskas is there. The cheskas.
They walked into the room.
Right.
Cheskas kavanah.
Yeah. No, but he's saying
the
not even
spiritual aspects.
No,
we
saying,
let Hashem manage.
He's saying even if they're not,
we're out of the.
even if they're not davening, even if they're not doing anything special.
Right. So the
but
spiritual
because they have
aspect,
potential. Right. So here we're saying that it takes effect.
Unbelievable.
It takes effect, and the breads would be sanctified. There was a big guy, Rabbi Shayash Zelig Margolius. I don't know if you heard of Shayash Zelig Margolius. He was a big guy in some Makubal. He wrote a large book showing Reb Shimon's opinion in the Gemara, how it matches up with what Reb Shimon holds in the Zohar. Now, Reb Shimon is the author of the Zohar. However, the academics, they say, oh no, the Zohar was found later. They always date everything later.
Right.
Anyway, he wrote this book showing that here you have all of these opinions that are clearly here you will look at the potential. Such ideas are much more Kabbalistic. I mean, you could explain this Kabbalistically, internal things. Amar Mar. The master said, what does Amar Mar means? That we're going to re-quote a Brisa. Here it's a Mishnah. Okay, that's fine. It still fits with our rule.
Where's the Gemara of Reb Shimon?
On Daf Kuf Bais, further in Menachos. I don't know if you have it.
That's the original place?
That's on the side of Daf Kuf Bais, the one that tells you where it is. He says over there I write all the list of where on Daf Kuf Bais I'll have it. It's all over Shas.
I can do it after. It
was Yeshaya Pick, Yeshaya Berlin. He adds in some things here. And Daf Kuf Bais. He says it's Psachim Yud Gimel, Krisis Chav Dal, and Tmurah Chav Gimel. And our Gemara. Okay. If you have another sacrifice, then you bring it together you bring the Nesachim, the meal offering together with him. The Gemara says, V'amar Rav Chizda says that Shemen she'efrishu l'shem mincha zeh pasal shem mincha acheres. A carbon mincha, most carbonis mincha, require oil. If you designate oil for one mincha, you can't bring it for another mincha. Here we're saying that you can bring the meal, the flour, and oil and wine for another carbon. How does that happen? Amar Rabbi Yanai explains that leiv bezdin masna aleim. By the nesachim, by what comes along with the animal sacrifice, the bezdin says if it's going to work, it means like as it was dedicated by when the koyanim. The bezdin doesn't mean the bezdin like Sanhedrin. It means the people in charge of this would make like a condition that if this is good, then good. Otherwise, we're going to use it for something else. So, im hutzrechu. That's their condition that they have. If it's required, then we're going to use it. If not, it will go to something else. The Gemara asks, that's a nice answer, but you're not resolving the full problem, because ihachi shemen nami. Why don't they do that with oil? The Gemara explains, shemen gufa de minchahu. Shemen, the oil, is not a secondary thing that comes along that we'll say we'll use it for another sacrifice. The oil is the sacrifice. The whole sacrifice is flour and oil. You can't say we're going to use it for a different sacrifice. This was the sacrifice. The Gemara asks, so if once they're making a condition, why don't they make a condition that if we don't need it, we can just sell it back for common use? Where it says Gezeira. That's a decree. That you can take things from the temple and start using it for personal use. The Gemara says, but now you can make a gzeir as well. It wasn't people are going to think that you can just switch it. Not because of the sacrifice became invalid or whatever. If we're making decrees on this, that you can just that we're afraid that you're going to take it out to chulin, maybe there should be a decree that you might switch it without any.
You said people see it. There were people like watching it, like.
It could be there were people watching. Could be. They couldn't make it all the way in, but there was 11 amas and then another 11 amas. They could go. They were in the. They could have gotten into the courtyard.
They're watching from the chayav.
From the
press box.
Even Goy were watching. The biggest building was in Goy.
Oh yeah.
They watched the whole procedure. It wasn't just something like a local internal thing that happens in the boardroom.
I thought that they could walk in. There were 11 amas right after the doorway that they could walk and stand in those long 125 amas by 11 amas, where they could stand there and watch.
No, it's another. Sorry.
So
Go off.
the Gemara explains. Hatani Matisya ben Yehuda. Matisya ben Yehuda explains that they wouldn't really do this, use it for another sacrifice. It was only they had another sacrifice available at that time, so they would immediately just move it over, and it was not noticed that it was being used for another sacrifice because it was there already, ready to go, right? The
So
Gemara,
you slip a fast one.
yeah. The Gemara says,
there was action going on. It wasn't just a quiet library corner.
What would happen if you didn't have a sacrifice ready at that exact moment? Nifsal Belina. Nifsal Belina, then you would have to let it wait for overnight and become puzzle. This is a classical thing that the Gemara does, what it's about to do. It says, sometimes the Mishnah says a case that it's kosher, and it says the next case is puzzle. And then when the Gemara discusses it, it says, actually, there's some in the middle cases that are also puzzle. So the Gemara says, so then why do you tell me the case of puzzle, the extreme case? You should have said the case of that's kosher, and said that that's only kosher in this instance, but in the instance that's closest to it, it's not kosher. Why do you go so far? So, adatani seifa, in place of saying in the seifa, im lav, that if you don't have a sacrifice right there, yifsalu belina, that you let it stay overnight, liflig belisni bedida, why don't you divide the original case in half and say like this, when do we say the original case? That it's going to be used for another sacrifice. That's only if you had a sacrifice there that was slaughtered. But if you don't have it there at that time, then it's not valid. Why don't you just say that? Why do you have to go to that lifts yifsalu balina? You leave it overnight. The Gemara explains hachinami ka'amar. That is actually what it meant to say, and it says like this: in what case were these words said? That you had a sacrifice right there. But if you don't have a sacrifice right there, it's as if
It's ready.
it was left overnight, upsulan, and it's invalid. Now, when you go back to the Mishnah didn't really say that. So, some of the Jewish thinkers, they say that we really weren't supposed to write the Mishnah. The Mishnah is the oral law. We weren't supposed to write it. So, but however, Rabbi saw in that time, that we have to do something. So he wrote it. But in order not to have it written entirely, that it's like just anyone can just buy it in the store or watch a YouTube video. So he didn't make it exactly perfect. There still needs to be a commentary on that needs to be explained. So that's what they say, the Chsuri Mechshav Achiktani, that's what some people explain. The Rambam, how the Rambam paskins, some of the scholars believe that the Rambam likes to paskin like the Mishnah. And whatever pshat in the Gemara fits best into the Mishnah, that's the one that he's going to choose. In other words, we have other rules of this one argues with him, this one argues with him, if it says imtim tzalaymar, if it says a teiku, like how to do this. But the Rambam's main thing, that's what the scholars believe, is that what fits best in and it's like the Rambam style. The Rambam is using the language of the Mishnah, and that's what's his. Okay. Then we're going back. Before we said that our Mishnah could be Rebbe Elazar Bar Shimon, who holds that you really need this Rika as well. But over here we're not going to require it because he's going to hold like his father. And his father holds Kolay Mid Lizarik Kizarik Dama. If it could have been sprinkled, potential is good enough. Where it says, Reb Shimon, you have to skip in Elazar, that's not accurate. Does Reb Shimon hold Leif Best in Masna Leim? See, now we're mixing the two things together. Because we started off saying that Reb Shimon holds Kolay Mid Lizarik. And now, but then we added in that why are you allowed to use it for another sacrifice? Because the Bezdin made a condition. We're asking, does Reb Shimon also hold that? Because you said it's Reb Shimon's opinion. Oh, that's a lot. If you have carbon tamid sacrifices that were not required, why weren't they required? Possibly because they were designated. They were brought into the room where they kept all the sacrifices that they were going. And then it became Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and when it comes to Rosh Chodesh Nisan, they opened up the new box of coins that everyone, the shkalim, and they would buy the new sacrifices from the new coins. And you still had some left over from the last years. So there were sacrifices that weren't needed. The Divrei Reb Shimon ein niftim tmidim. You can't redeem those sacrifices to go out if they don't have a blemish. But according to the sages, you can. Obviously, Reb Shimon holds that the Bezdin doesn't make a condition on them when it sanctified them. The Gemara says Shani Hasim, just like the Cantabria. It's different. Over there, by an animal sacrifice, there's a way of making it that it's not a sacrifice. You let it graze until it gets a mum. And a mum was fairly common. The animal gets older. It falls, it gets a scratch, it eats something. So there's a way of getting it out of its sanctity. However, a mincha sacrifice does not walk around and graze and get a mum.
So Leif Bezdin, but why doesn't the Gemara say Leif Bezdin Masna Leim over there? It went from one mincha to another mincha.
You mean to the shlamim? To the
other zevach.
Oil.
Whatever.
Oh.
It was used to another zevach. So
Right.
it didn't lose its kedusha. Here, you're talking that they should be poide and they should be chulin.
Right.
It's a huge difference between the original Lev Bezdin Masna Leim was talking that it went from one zevach to another zevach. So
Right.
it went from one side, one designation of hekdesh to another designation of hekdesh. Here, Reb Shimon says they become totally different.
It's a different time. They change. Time change.
It's chulin. He wants to say nifdu, and then they become
Yeah.
completely chulin.
Your question, Tosfos doesn't ask it, but Tosfos answers it. Tosfos is bothered by something else. Tosfos is bothered with, why do you have to take it out to chulin? You could have used it as ketzah mizbeach. It means when the mizbeach is empty, you just bring it on up as the altar, and that's what they did. They brought it up. So Tosfos explains that is a solution for some of the sacrifices, But some of the sacrifices, for example, a korban chatas, which cannot be used for kate, you can't just change it like that. Over there, you actually do need to wait till it gets a mum. So there were certain instances where you needed to wait for a mum. So in those instances, what the Gemara is saying, it's trying to cover all bases. Even those instances where I can't use it for Ketzah Mizbeach, I would use it, I would let it get a mum and then it gets redeemed.
So, for example, if a person in Lev Bezim Master, Rabbi Yanai says, if a person brings, he has to bring a toida, and he brings 40, and this guy also had his 40 and his wine and this and that. So on that guy's sacrifice, it'll actually be 80, because you're bringing this other korban that was pasul and Lev Bezin Masnalim, so he brings all the 80. My question is, when it gets transferred from one mincha to the other mincha, does it have to become chulin? Or they're saying, because the whole idea of bringing a korban is you bring something chulin, you make it hagdish. Right. Does it go through transformation of going into chulin and then it becomes hagdish, right, or it goes from hagdish to hagdish?
Right. My understanding of it, just without seeing it specifically, is that we're dealing specifically with the what's it called? The things that come along on the side of a regular sacrifice.
The suffering.
Yeah. So it's like an add-on. So my sacrifice is this. I have a special halacha. I have to bring this along. So
if
this
you bring
sacrifice,
the korban without the nesachim,
so then
okay.
I think the temple itself needs to bring nesachim. Someone's got to bring the nesachim with it. If a person sends it and he didn't send it along, I think the temple.
Okay, that's another whole.
So what happens is that these nesachim that are not going to be used for this sacrifice that's invalid will be just applied to the next. It's not the actual sacrifice; it's these add-ons to a sacrifice that will get used. And I don't think it needs to go out. I think it's just it will get used for the next thing. Okay. Vlad Taida. It's an interesting Mishnah. I mentioned before, once or twice when I was a kid, the teacher asked the class, what happens if the korban Pesach, after they shech the korban Pesach, there's a baby inside. So do you use that for a korban Pesach, or can you keep that? So the answer to that question was that the korban Pesach is a male, it's not a female. It was a trick question. However, there are other sacrifices that are female, and the question is a real question. In all of those sacrifices, what happens to the child? It's a real issue. So the korban Pesach is actually very young. It's in its first year. When they give birth, it's around that season anyway, so you're dealing with a very small animal. That doesn't mean the animals, they start young. They, teenage, comparable. Okay. Vlad Taida, an offspring of a korban Taida. So what happened was he designated a pregnant Taida and gave birth. Utmurasa. And it's exchange. You're really not supposed to make to Tmura. It's a biblical prohibition. What happens is someone says, okay, this animal, if someone says, this animal I'm going to bring as a sacrifice, then he looks at his other animal. He says, I'm going to bring this one instead of that one. So you're not allowed to do that, because the logic of that, even though we don't need to give a logic for the Torah, but the logic of that was maybe you're exchanging it for of lesser quality. But it doesn't matter, even if it's a higher quality, you're not allowed to exchange.
Trying to save money, or you're trying to
So what happens? Hifrish Taida va'avda. You designate a korban Taida, and the animal gets lost. So v'hifrish acheres tachta, and then you designate another Taida because you lost it. So einatun alechem. These second sacrifices don't need to bring the 40 loaves to be brought with it. Which, in other words, you may be able to bring one of them first, whichever one you're going to bring first, because you designated it.
So you bring your 40. I'm saying you
together
you
with the first one.
You never did it because you lost it, right?
Well, then you find the problem is then you found it. then you find the first one.
So you are bringing breads, or you're not bringing breads?
You're bringing one portion of bread. Then you're not bringing two. Okay. Even though you have two carbon the sacrifices, you're only bringing one portion of bread.
Okay.
How do you get two? Well, there's different instances here. It's either a vlad or a tmura or an exchange.
When you lost the toida and the bread's already made.
With the breads made already, I don't know. No, I don't know. Even if they were, no, the breads couldn't have been made. Were the breads made in the temple? No, I think we said the breads were made out of the temple, and the shechita was going to sanctify the breads, right? The vessel, it needs to be in a vessel, and then of the shechita.
Mm-hmm.
So you only bring one portion of bread. Shenemar v'hikr v'al zevach hatayda. Hatayda tun alechem v'lei vlada v'lei chilufa v'lei tmarasa. It's interesting that it puts the second case in the third case in the middle, and the second case at the end. It like switched the order on me. So tun alechem. Those do not require bread. Tana Rabbanan. It's taught in a Bais. What does the pasuk mean? Let's see this. Toida yakriv. It says yakrivenu. Imal toida yakrivenu. Minayin lemafrish toidasa va'avda. V'hifrish acheres tachtea. V'nimtza sarishayna. How do you know that if someone designates a carbon toida and then he loses it, so he designates another one, and then he goes back and he finds, oh, that's where it was. He finds the first one. And both of them are standing in front of him. That he gets to choose now which one he wants to offer, and he can bring the bread with that one. It says the taida he brings, and it sounds like he can choose. It's more open. Maybe the second one also requires bread because they're both taidas. Now the word yakrivenu has a suffix, a nun vav, the nun vav, and if the nun vav has a dot in it, has a dagish, then it means him or it, singular. If it doesn't have the dot, then it becomes a plural. So the Gemara is learning that it has a dot, and it's a singular. Echad v'lei shnayim. You only bring the bread once. Achad shvi b'kasav u'miyot. But now we know that we have one thing that's inclusive, yakriv, and then we have yakrivenu, that you bring it. So minayin l'rabis vlada b'chilufa utmuris la'akrava. How do you know that it's going to include that you bring the actual animal? You just excluded the breads. Talmud imal taida. We have an inclusion. If on the taida, which sounds like there may be something else that's brought with the taida. Yachol yutunas lechem.